So Cody and Norton, they're doing their contract signing, and all this. Cody talks about having his first WWE match against Randy in 2007, and he says he saw him then win the Rumble in the main event of WrestleMania. Talks about leaving and coming back when he didn't have anybody, including his wife and brother, but he had Randy Orton. So he says he knows he's not Randy's son or brother, but he was always proud to be his boy. And then they both sign the contract. Orton looks, somewhat like emotional coming off of this. Orton then grabs the mic and he says, "This was not supposed to be hard. This was supposed to be Drew McIntyre sitting in that seat." Cody then interrupts and says he wants to try to make it easier for Randy. He says he knows he will get the best of Randy Orton when the bell rings at WrestleMania. But he also says when the match is over, "I will always love you." He starts singing. The Whitney Houston song to him. It was weird. Orton signs, hugs Cody, and then slams his head into the table. He low blows him. He then rips Cody's shirt apart. The announcers ask what Orton's doing. Orton proceeds to attack Cody with the steel steps, busting him open. Orton shoves Aldis. Some stunned reactions from the crowd, but, of course, these are immediately also met with Randy, Randy, Randy chants. Yeah. Jelly Roll even comes in. He's trying to stop him, and Orton even shoves Jelly Roll down. So Orton places Cody's head between the steps, or at least the inner angle of the steps and the table. And then Orton proceeds to come back later with a steel chair, smashing Cody's head against these steps. Very safe, but, very nicely done angle here. So it is Orton, being way more vicious than we've seen him in many, many years at this point. And what did you take from this? How did you interpret this? Was this an actual heel turn? How did you read all of this?
I think it's a heel turn. I think it's Randy is giving into the voices in his head, which he's been teasing for several weeks. It was a weird moment for it to happen, like Cody telling him he'll always love him, and he wants the legend killer at WrestleMania, and something that makes him snap. That is weird, and we do get some close-ups of Randy looking somewhat conflicted after all of this. But in the end, a very eventful heel turn, and something that frankly woke me up quite a lot from a very mid episode of SmackDown, a very badly, I thought, paced episode of SmackDown as well, right up to the entrances of these two guys, which were the full Monty for both of them. And while I'm on that subject, even like R-Truth, we got most of his rap. This entire episode was paced very slowly, I felt, but this was quite something at the end. We got blood. We got a full-on heel turn, real viciousness from Randy. So, it'll be interesting to see in the coming weeks whether, do we get a regression? Do we get the voices stopping and telling him he did wrong, or do we just get a complete continuation of this like psycho version of Randy Orton? I think that might be interesting. The other interesting thing for me was the crowd reaction that you mentioned. I think they did everything they could, from the viciousness to the attack on Jelly Roll. Not so much the shoving of Nick Aldis. People wouldn't really care about that. But, I think they did a lot to try and get the crowd to boo. And many of them did, but many of them were chanting Randy's name also.
The show kind of ended with Randy, Randy, Randy chants. And really, at this stage of like wrestling promotion, I have to think they expected some of this reaction, right? Yeah. First of all, you're looking at the the matchup itself. Randy Orton versus Cody Rhodes. Randy Orton is universally loved. Cody has already kind of been like, having to fend off some negative sentiment attached to him. And so like, I have to think they would have expected all of this. And so I'm kind of left, watching this segment, not necessarily feeling like we got to see a full-on heel turn. Like, especially in the way this segment was kind of set up. I mean, you had Cody essentially saying, I I know I'm going to see, the Randy Orton that was the youngest WWE champion of all time, the Randy Orton that, was essentially at his best. And we all know what that means. Randy Orton that is at his best is a heel Randy Orton who does shit like this. And so Randy, coupled with by saying, it wasn't supposed to be this hard, shaking Cody's hand before proceeding to attack him and low blow him in very vicious manner, might I add. It all just feels like it's exactly what Cody wants. It's what Cody asked for, and it feels more like this is Randy obliging by doing what his opponent has asked of him, by unleashing his full self, his full natural self, and no longer holding back, and almost doing it in a way that could be perceived as respectful for his opponent, because he wants to give his opponent his best, and that means doing this to him. So, to me, I'm watching this as somebody who's trying to interpret whether or not this was Randy Orton actually being heel or not. And I don't necessarily sense that it was. I just sense this was Randy being his best at the request of Cody Rhodes.
It's an interesting takeaway, and I think it'll be really interesting to see whether they carry that through next week. And I think they could do that successfully. The reason I lent somewhat more towards this is a conventional heel turn, and yes, Randy has always had that in him, was the extremity of all of this. The busted open, the attack with the chair, which, we did everything but have Cody stretchered out. And I think to some extent, that just felt a bit extreme rather than just RKOing him or something like that, which is, I think, what a lot of people would have maybe thought we'd get. That would be Randy just healing it up, but in a way that's very expected and somewhat in character. This felt like a full-on kind of turn to the dark side. But
RKOing somebody is what he does in the opening segment of the show to a Trick Williams or whoever, right? For WrestleMania level main event, I think the Randy Orton character, even as a babyface, would need to tap into this. And therefore I feel like there's some sort of justification, even as a babyface, that he would do this. But it does remain very interesting how Cody Rhodes will react to this. I mean, that will ultimately be the, maybe what determines it. Does Cody take this as such an offense that he'll look at it as a straight up heel turn? And how does Randy himself, does he talk differently? Does he act differently? Does he go on to attack other innocent people in all of this? So that'll be interesting. As far as a way to get people talking about this main event that we just found out about, last week, I thought they did a good job here. This felt like the type of angle you would expect for a WrestleMania main event, at least for one of the nights, right? So I quite enjoyed all of this.
And to me, I enjoyed it too. Even if the future direction isn't absolutely clear. In fact, I kind of enjoy that it's not absolutely clear. And it really did feel like someone hit the accelerator at the end of this show, because, as I mentioned, up to this point, it felt like a kind of a nothingy story. It didn't really bring us too much forward toward WrestleMania story-wise until this closing angle.
Yeah. Of course, with Orton and Cody, they benefit from having a shorter window because of all the history that they've had, and also because of all the constant teases they've had over the years of Cody or Randy, looking jealous of Cody subtly in the background. And I assume all these things will be brought up. I look forward to them digging into a lot more of their history together. You barely scratched the surface in all of this. So they have 5 weeks left to tell this story, and I hope they do a strong job, because I would say they certainly started off really well tonight.
And even if they continue in the vein they did tonight, I could see the WrestleMania live crowd cheering for Randy and booing Cody. Oh yeah. Earlier in this show, there were some boos for Cody. Just in his, you would hear sort of the through noise from the crowd in some backstage segments. When he made his entrance, there wasn't so much. Yeah. It was more of the conventional Cody reception, but. Yeah, I think all of that could be fascinating too, just exactly how they're positioned. What
the segment tells me is that I don't sense that the company is flirting with the idea of a Cody Rhodes heel turn. like this was Cody placed in like what looked to be a very sympathetic role, right?
Yeah.
So to me, like it wipes away that possibility of Cody being maybe more of a straight up heel in this program against a Randy Orton. What I think it will be well, a harder edge Randy Orton that maybe some will be able to perceive as a full on heel, taking on a babyface Cody Rhodes. And then ultimately it's kind of up to the crowd how they react on the night of.
Agreed. Yeah. But I think Randy is getting a good reception, probably.
Oh, yeah, very likely.
The Post Wrestling Cafe is your one-stop shop for all of the coverage that Post Wrestling has to offer. 2 big rewind-aways this month with WWF Insurrection from May of 2002. This UK-only pay-per-view featured the Raw brand going overseas and ending with the infamous plane ride from hell. Then we're going to take a look at AWA's Super Sunday from April of 1983. A new edition of Talk Can Be Yours, plus MCU Later, Book Club, and coverage of UFC 326, TNA Sacrifice, and of course, XL editions of Rewind to Raw, Dynamite, and SmackDown with all the news of the day. Join now at postwrestlingcafe.com.